the American Booksellers Association. They have something called the Children's Institute. And we were side by side, and he was also interested in loosely, I wasn't interested in it because it was my St. Louis time, but we discussed the Back to the Land movement, the idea of communal living, can it work, can it not work? We discussed all of those things then. He had the interest that we have a new generation of people who are, they're the people that we buy from at the farmer's market. As they watch the world seemingly teeter, as we're wondering if it's going to be okay. So many of them are trying the self-sufficiency thing, as I did when I was a teenager. Home early, and I wound up trying collective living, growing organically. I still don't like turnips because our first year, that was the main crop we were successful at. I've never developed a warm feeling towards turnips ever since. But after I left the commune, I wanted to live in a city that I wasn't somebody's girlfriend or daughter. The nearest big city was St. Louis. Our commune was in Ava, Missouri. And after I left, so I landed in St. Louis, and I had a really fascinating year here. And I don't think about it that much because I soon found the things that would stay with me. But let's say St. Louis and I dated, was like the experience. And because of that, it's interesting that very ancient past, and at a book signing in Springfield yesterday, there was a woman with gray hair down to here, and she said, I knew you from Ava, Missouri. You invited Ava to come to Thanksgiving at the commune. And I said, I did? And she said, you did. And I said, how was it? And she said, a little girl who was born and raised in Ava, it blew my mind. And I said, what do you remember? She said, oh, the food. She said, I said, what did we serve? She goes through and she remembered. Wow. So it's a very funny way to come back to this world. And of course, Left Bank was around there. And I used it as a patron and related very, very fondly to it. So this is the 30th anniversary edition of that. But what I would really like to talk a little bit before I read to you is, will it be okay? And, as Cliff was talking in the introduction about what we have all been through with the pandemic, etc., and I'll leave you to fill in which things are bugging you the most about the etc. This book, again, I wrote this book, the first version of it, very early and very young. I wrote this book when I was 24. I am a month and a half away from being 70. Well, when the pandemic hit, and its first draft had illustrations by Ben Schechter, very sweet illustrations, we would say a little bit sentimental to our eye now. And although the little girl in it has strong feelings, in the cover you can see she looks a little bit worried there, you didn't get the feelings too much. I adore this set of illustrations. But the way this book came to have its new life is Mark Graff, who's sitting over there in the back row. Mark and I are married. It's third marriage for both of us, and we are liking it a lot. And like everyone, when the pandemic hit, what do we do? What do we do? What is this? What is this? And I kind of consider the pandemic to be like a very cruel game of musical chairs. If you were self-employed, if you could work from home, if you had a home, if you had income, if you had a partner, congratulations, you have a chair. If you were alone, you were going to be alone for a while. No chair for you, no relationship chair. If you didn't own a home, and maybe you didn't have the money to pay the rent, a serious no chair. A lot of people were without chairs. And so Mark and I, lucky enough to have chairs, what could we do to make things better? My skills are I was a cook, but I can't cook for people under that. And I'm a writer. Well, I can't really write for people. Mark is a cyber defender. How do you intersect that with the crisis we were all facing? So I came up with this idea. I did not think it through. I'm trying to learn to think things through, but I tend to just leap in, and then as I'm swimming among the sharks and the jellyfish, go, yeah, I kind of should have thought about which water this was before I dived in. At any rate, we decided that we could do read alouds. And Mark, who, when he was in high school, went to the library where he grew up and read books to the blind, for the blind, recorded before there were audiobooks around. He's a very experienced reader. But I started this solo, and I didn't realize we did it as a Facebook Live, and at first there were 8 or 10 people, and then there were more and more and more. And by the end, we did it for 108 days. That was the amount of books, including books that I wrote, books that my late mother, Charlotte Zolotow, who some of you might know her book, she was pretty famous for William's Doll, and which Free to Be You and Me was started with Charlotte's William's Doll. And she also did Mr. Rabbit and the Lovely Crescent. So we had her books. Mark's daughter, Lisa Graff, also writes middle grade novels and had then done one picture book. So we read the family picture books. Came out to be 108 days, which I later learned is both, it's a rosary number, and the Indian people who do japa, it's 108 beads. We didn't know that. We didn't know it would be 108. Just one of those weird synchronicity things. So doing a Facebook Live, I can easily read a book out loud to a class of kids or grown-ups and hold it up. But Facebook Live sort of reverses things, and it was very screwy. So I quickly dragged Mark into it, and he held up the pictures, and I read it, other than on his daughter's book, which he read, and I held up the pictures. All of that to say that the first book I selected to read was the old edition of Will It Be Okay? Because probably of all the books that I've read, it's the one that I consider most reassuring, most comforting, but not, in none of my writing do I ever believe in kicking the kitty litter over the bad or dangerous stuff and feelings. You have to call things what they are. You have to acknowledge them in order to, let us say, transcend them. So I read this at that time, and when it was over, looking at the state that our country and our world was in, I thought, well, I wonder if this book could maybe have another life. And so I typed up the words from the book, and there were a few things that I felt needed to be changed, updated, brought into the present. And I sent it off to my agent, and in a not very long time, as my friend Sweetie Berry, who's sitting in the very back, pointed out to somebody else this morning, quite quickly it got accepted. Most books don't get accepted fast, and that was interesting. Then the company, Cameron, they found Jessica Love for an illustrator. And she also did Julián Is, a Mermaid, a marvelous book that I had long admired. I was thrilled. And so out of something so terrible, the pandemic, and our attempt to incrementally, tiny, just do something, this came out. And, I like to think that, and maybe it's naive to be 70 and still believing this, out of bad can come good if you engage with it as it is. So, okay, that's the story behind the story. And I will jump into reading it unless you have any questions about anything that I have said so far, or comments or anything. No. All right. Will It Be Okay? Crescent Dragonwagon with beautiful art by Jessica Love. And you'll notice it's dedicated, this version is dedicated to Sweetie Berry, who's in the back. And as I said there, she's a friend and collaborator, and she does much to make it okay for many people, including me. Will it be okay? Yes.
It's funny because I just looked on the website
But-
and it said you have copies.
What if there is thunder and lightning? Good. Jessica Love. I mean, when this child feels something, you see what she is feeling. You sit at your window and watch the rain beating down over the houses and streets in the dark night. You see how special it is because the lightning shows the rainy sky and countryside and all the city. And you pay attention because the loud thunder is calling you, saying, look, look, the world is receiving a deep, long drink. But what if there is snow? Lots and lots of snow. Well, you put on your red leggings and your orange boots and your pink robe and your plaid scarf and 2 pairs of striped mittens, 1 pair on top of the other. Love how bundled up she looks. But what if we plant a garden and nothing, not even the cabbages, come up? We go to the nursery and we buy 7 tomato plants, just in case. We come home, we dig 7 holes in the garden and put a tomato plant and compost in each one. We pat the earth back around each tomato plant and pour a bucket of water around each one too, to make them feel at home.
Thank you for calling through.
Then we go inside to read a book. When we come out again, there is a tiny row of cabbage seedlings, and also the bush beans have come up. But what if a bee stings me? You run to the kitchen, and I rub a piece of raw onion back and forth over it. You say, a piece of onion? That's silly. That won't work. But it does. But what if I am mad at everyone? You run away. You pack raisins, walnuts, oranges, crackers, and a flashlight in a red bandana. You knot its 4 corners together and you tie it to a stick. You carry it over your shoulder. You walk and walk until you come to a park. You stay all afternoon sitting by yourself, then on a bench. Then you swing, pushing yourself up so hard. You go so high that you make up a song to yourself about being a bird. When you come home again, you are not mad at everything. But what if somebody doesn't like me? You feel lonely and sad. You walk and walk until you come to a small pond. You kneel in the grass by the edge of this pond, and you see something move. Put out your hand, and a tiny frog, no bigger than your thumbnail, pops into it. Very carefully, you lift your hand up to your ear, and the frog whispers, "Other people like you. Other people love you. Maybe that person will like you again. Maybe not. In any case, you like them. You're lovable. And it is all right. Because a frog tells you this, you believe it. But what if I forget my lines in the school play? make up new ones then and there. And later everyone will say, what a wise and sensible child. She forgot her lines, so she made up new ones. But what if nobody likes the way that I dance? You go dancing in the woods, alone in the crackling leaves. One day you meet someone else dancing in the woods. You dance together. You throw leaves on each other. You gather the leaves into a big pile and jump into them. Then you go home and draw pictures and drink cocoa with whipped cream. But what if you die? My loving doesn't die. It stays with you as warm as two pairs of striped mittens, one pair on top of the other. When you remember you and me, you say, what can I do with so much love? I will have to give some away. So, you love thunder and lightning, snow, planting cabbages, and bees. You dance with other people in the leaves, and are in plays with them, and read books with them, and get mad at them, and make up with them. You love them, and they love you, and you eat raisins together. So, it will be okay? Yes, my love, it will. It will be okay. Thank you, thank you. Now, you know, raisins are mentioned twice in the book. Once when she puts
In a kerchief.
and once when she puts them in the kerchief, and once when the mother says, and you love them and they love you and you eat raisins together. And because one of my areas is also food, and that raisins. But you know, how exciting is it to go, here, have some raisins? So I went back to yet another book of mine, the book Passionate Vegetarian, which was a James Beard Award winner, but that's neither here nor there. But it has an excellent, excellent oatmeal cookie recipe in it that has raisins. I know some people say that they attribute their trust issues to thinking that they were chocolate chips and they were actual raisins. But I actually like raisins in oatmeal cookies. And back in the days when, in another facet of my life, I was an innkeeper, Dairy Hollow House. And some of you may even have been to Dairy Hollow House. It was a country inn and restaurant that I owned with my late husband, Ned Shank. And it was in Eureka Springs. We had it for many years. And when guests checked in, they had a cookie waiting in their room with a pitcher of iced herbal cooler. And every day, once the room was cleaned up, they would have a different kind of cookie, which got pretty challenging if you had guests there for a long stay. You know, you were kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for different recipes. Anyway, but our departure gift was always when they checked out. You know, most hotels you leave and goodbye, that's it. But our view was people used to vacation for a month or 6 weeks. Now they're lucky if it's a 3-day weekend. So in us thinking about the travel experience, guests, looking after people, we thought, you know, it ought to be something that you extend the stay by looking forward to it and remembering it fondly. So once we had that piece figured out for us, just because of the way we did it, we started to do a departure cookie, which was always the oatmeal cookie. And there was a cookie per guest in their own bag. And we would put in a little wash and dry so they wouldn't get the steering wheel sticky. And so I thought, well, I will get those cookies made and give them out when I'm doing book signings and so on. And sometimes I make them myself. It happens that this particular time, because we did a big event in St. Louis, and there was soup and bread involved in that one, and Sweetie managed to get the cookies made perfectly to my recipe. So these are definitely homemade cookies. They're not somebody else made them. And she even bagged them up individually so we can all stay safe. And I am going to come around.
And these were made in a commercial.
Here, person watching on streaming, here's a cookie for you. You are so welcome. And you can thank Sweetie too. And I think she got her daughter involved in making them too. So we can thank Madison
They
too.
do have nuts in them, so anyone has a nut allergy, you need to know that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
It
you.
is vegan butter and it is all the right things. So you don't have to know that. If you have a question, please ask.
Please, thank you. Here. Cliff, you get one too.
I just get one?
Oh, you take two. Take one for every single staff person. There you go. I have one. You have one? Thank you. Okay, you'll give them to the gentleman there. So, are there any questions, comments, anything I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
Are you still in Eureka Springs?
No, you may or may not know, Ned, darling Ned, went out on a bicycle ride in November of 2000 and was hit by a car. And so for me to say, will it be okay after having lived through that sudden and devastating loss, I think it was probably 10 years before I was interiorly recognizable to myself. And if any of you are members of, as I put it, the club no one wants to join, meaning you lose someone who's essential to you, particularly suddenly, you're functional and everyone thinks you're all right. So much before you really are. It took 20 years before I remarried. And so the common advice is don't make any sudden changes after you're suddenly widowed because you might regret it. So I waited 2 years and then I moved away from Eureka. I moved to the East Coast partly because my mother and aunt were really aging and I knew I would be called on. I didn't know how much, it's quite a lot, but I knew I would be called on to do that. And also my late aunt owned a beautiful piece of property in Vermont and she had run out of money and it was going to be sold. And when I heard it was going to be sold, I cried for 3 days because I loved that piece of property so much. And then I thought, okay, this is a loss I can do something about. And so, as I like to say, with financing so creative, I should have been given a MacArthur. I managed to buy 65 acres and a very, very old farm. And it had a beautiful pond that I had loved swimming in my whole life. And I lived up there for 15 years. And I still love the property. I am still so sad that I did have to let it go finally. But let's face it, if you're an aging person and you've lived in a warm climate to move to a rigorous climate with, instead of owning a small piece, suddenly there's 65 acres to look after. And, it was too much for me and I recognized that I had to let it go. Besides which, I love the social ecology of this part of the world, the Ozarks in particular, much more than I do in Vermont. Vermont and New England, part of the social ecology there is chilly, just as the climate is. It's just not as friendly. People are kind underneath, but in Eureka Springs or Fayetteville or that area, you meet someone and 15 minutes later, you're in their house and they're serving you coffee and they're showing you the videotape of their gallbladder surgery or something. Whereas in Vermont, you could be neighbors with someone for 30 years before you knew that they had been fighting a long battle with prostate cancer or something. And I was in love with my property there but I was pretty lonely. I do spend a lot of time alone as a writer. You probably wouldn't know this, it's just chit chat around. I'm kind of the world's most outgoing introvert. I really need a lot of time by myself. That allows me to come out and be very transparent and goofy and all that, but I need a lot of time by myself. However, in Vermont, it was too much. If you go 5 days without seeing anybody except like the wild turkeys outside, that's too much. And so for several winters, I visited different places and thought, do I want to live here? Do I want to come back to Eureka? And some friends were on sabbatical. He's a classics professor at the University of Arkansas. So I stayed in their home, and Fayetteville was very gracious. It had all the social stuff that I had loved about Eureka, was less gossipy. It had a fantastic library, fantastic theater season, community, not season. There were, 5 or 6. Mark used to live in New York and was in walking distance of every theater on Broadway or close to Broadway. But he's within walking distance as just as many. Where? In Fayetteville, Arkansas, can this be? And so I gradually decided, all right, and thing after thing kept happening. One of the theater companies gave me accepted a play of mine for a new play festival. Thing after thing like that. One day I was driving and I'm thinking over this. I'm on College Avenue, and I swear to you, I could not hit a red light. It's just, I approached to turn green. And I finally said to myself one day, Dragon, what is it going to take? This is where you need to move. So I did. Mark and I he was still in New York then. I did move there solo at first. Mark, coming to visit me, came to fall in love with the community too. And then one day he said, what do you say we buy a house here? We bought a house, and to my big surprise, I have a new life. It's a new life and it's an old life. I'm still cooking, I'm still writing, I'm still mostly introverted and then sparkly outgoing. And I still care about what I always cared about, but I live in a different town with someone who is still new and interesting to me. It's a very different person not only from the man that I was married to for so long, but in what he does and the way he thinks about the world. And so it's interesting to me, just interesting. And so, after, a series of heavy whacks, losing Ned, losing my beloved aunt, I spent the last years of my life, my mother died at 99, spending time with her. I can say definitively for me so far, it is okay. And I'll tell you one funny thing that my mother said, and I have it written down and taped to my bulletin board at the time. And my mother, when she was young, she was one of those people that liked to sort of sigh a lot and talk about how things were difficult and that nobody really understood everything she was going to do. Her life looked pretty good to me, but she didn't seem particularly happy in it. So I was ecstatic when she was in extreme old age that she started remembering it happily. And so one night she said to me the following: since I've had all the days and they were wonderful, I want you to do the same. And I said, Charlotte, if I do that, what will be the result? And she looked at me and she said, wiser. Now, my interpretation of that from a 90-something-year-old, she was maybe 97, 98, was she was saying, don't be going, it's so hard all the time. The days are wonderful. And it's wiser to take what is wonderful in that moment, to take the oatmeal cookie, to look for the frog, even if it isn't there, to raise your hand to your ear and hear what life is saying to you and to interpret it in a way that nourishes your heart in some fashion. It's a very long question to do you still live in Eureka?
That's really good.
Thank you. Any other questions?
What was the name of your play?
I'm sorry?
What was the name of your play?
The name of the play, well, let me hold up your book here. Thank you. So Cornbread Gospels is another book of mine. And, I had signed the contract to write this book while Ned was alive and my life, and I was working on Passionate Vegetarian, this big ass book.
I've got that one too.
I mean, it's a weight training device. You could do like that and get your curls in. And I felt, so, that was a really rosy time in my life. And I thought, I had a sort of Scarlett O'Hara moment where I dropped to my knees, finishing that book and said, as God is my witness, I will never write a book this long ever again. So I called my editor and I said, couldn't we do just a nice, simple little one subject cookbook next? And she said, finish this one and then we'll talk about it. And she said, well, harumph. And then she evidently called it wrong because I got a call from the president of the company, the then alive Peter Workman Publishing. And he said, did we do something wrong? I understand you're offering a book about cornbread to some other publishers. I said, I offered it to y'all. You turned it down. And he said, well, we would like to do it. So I signed on the contract. Everything's great. So suddenly I have to write a cheerful, happy little single subject book at a time when I'm really in personal misery. But as I began to explore cornbread, cornmeal, corn itself, what did I discover? But many, many of the indigenous people of this country, they told the creation story that every great religion and tradition, and for that matter, you see it and will it be okay? It's the human story. Birth, living, death, resurrection in some way. And many of the native people told that story with countless variations through corn. And, corn was originally the mother of the people in Abenaki, I think it was. And the people began to multiply and soon they were starving. And the mother goes to the Great Spirit and he says, you have to have them kill you and cut you into pieces and bury you. And then that will save the people. And she doesn't want to tell them, they don't want to murder her, but she does what they say. And from the pieces of her body, up come the corn stalks, and the people are saved. So somehow, writing this cheerful little one-topic book and finding out it became part of the process of metabolizing grief. The play was called Until Just Moistened, a not quite one-woman show with crumbs. And essentially, it's about how I managed to, and there, I had a wheeling suitcase that I brought on stage, and I had all the ingredients for cornbread. So when I got to salt, I talked about tears. When I got to cornmeal, I told the story of Ned and me and my friend and musician pal, Bill Hames, best friends, never romantic, but we've been best friends since our 20s. He did the music that goes with it. And I don't sing very well, but I'm not too self-conscious about it. So one of the songs that he came up with, let's see if I can remember. Well, you think it's mostly something that they eat in the South. You think it might be fried. You can't remember the last time a piece was in your mouth. It might be genetically modified, but your grandmother made it and your favorite aunt, your grandmother made it and you liked it then, ate it in the kitchen with your favorite aunt. I'm telling you people now, get with the trend, because cornbread is the new croissant. Thank you, Bill Higgs. So that is the play, and that is its connection with Cornbread Gospels. Any other questions? That can take way too long to answer.
Your gumbo zeb is the best thing ever.
Thank you. I love that soup. It's such an adventure to make that damn
And
soup.
it's a commitment.
You know, it's a commitment. A lot of people do it sort of once a year around New Year's.
That's when I do it, yeah.
Somehow it's really good for that. There's a whole chapter on gumbo zeb in Soup and Bread. Gumbo zeb is the bastardization from French gumbo des herbes, because it's a green gum. It's not entirely green, but it has a lot of greens in it, and it's vegetarian because New Orleans, Creole, there are times when you don't eat meat or even fish. And so gumbo zeb was the vegetarian gumbo. Although, as I say in that, whenever I say it, I always kind of picture great uncle Zeb, or but it wasn't after Zebulon or any Z name. It was gumbo des herbes. I'm so glad you like it. Any other questions, comments, anything? Cliff, anything to add?
No, absolutely. This is fantastic. You can talk more if you have. I-
Sweetie, anything you would like me to hit on?
I'm just a second, wonderful, I think we're so. I think
Do you want to come up here? So you can
ask
see?
but I don't want to take the time away. I'm an educator and I'm a strategist, and in my role, I've been 30 years in education. But one of the fascinating things about this book is it's 45 years old this year. So there are 4, sometimes 5 generations of families who have read and seen this book. And as an educator, I'm out working in state departments and school districts and libraries and hometowns and Boy Scouts and you name it. Everywhere we go, including yesterday, when a 77-year-old man or so came up and said, I was very sick and a younger man, and this is what got me through cancer. I was at a hospital in Memphis 2 weeks ago where the parents called me every single night since saying, we know she will not make it the week, but we've read it every night, and she continues to smile as leukemia takes over her body to say the love will live on. In COVID times, this book is important to me because everyone is isolated, and it doesn't matter what your heart age is, we need reassurance. But it's 45 years old, gang. How many authors have books that have had so many reiterations that 45 years later, your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and their mother say, I read that as a child from a 29-year-old author. It just doesn't work that way. And as from the publishing end of it, when we talk about the hundreds of thousands of copies of this, how relevant is reassurance? How relevant is facing fear? Presence about fearless living. And this is not saying they'll like you tomorrow. We're not whitewashing the concept of the world's okay. We're saying you do what you need to do anyway, and later you'll feel better, and maybe they will too. Maybe they'll like you, maybe they won't. We didn't ignore the problems. We didn't tell the child some disrespectful thing that said, oh, the cancer's going to disappear tomorrow and you're going to go home. We said, what could happen afterwards if love was involved? And action was taken instead of fear. Isn't that a lovely thing to say to our hearts? Because the real world is things don't go away and things are hard. But a child of any age needs to know that they can take action, and courage comes with action, and it will be okay. And I'm so blessed to be able to be here to see everybody share their story. If you'd like to share your story of Crescent or a book, her website's dragonwagon.com. And we are gathering for her 70th birthday, this 29-year-old author, the stories. And you can just go to the front page and it'll say my story on the menu bar next week. And you can sell a comment if you want to record it with you. I love the stories because we're about that. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Oh,
And what a privilege it is for me to have been a conduit for, because of my really good writing. In my heart of hearts, I don't feel like I'm the writer. I feel like I'm what it came through. And that was certainly true of this book. And when I hear those stories and similar ones, I think, I was a fortunate conduit. The experience, the transcendent experience of being a conduit is always lovely. Yes,
I have
ma'am.
another question.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
for your 108 stories that you told
Yes.
on Facebook, like, I'm kind of dumb about Facebook. Are those recorded anywhere or?
They can
are
get-
not?
Let's get Sweetie back.
What a great question. We have some on the
Come on,
website.
come on, so they can see you on this thing too. She manages all the,
I'm a creative strategist, and what that really means is I handle the messy parts of your brilliance.
like, I don't know the tech
So
stuff.
when you have lots of time to do wonderful things, you don't want her to do wonderful things in tech. You want her to do wonderful things like writing more books. So we recorded all 100, and because it's not very fun to see a book from 6 feet out, even though it was lovely at the time to be with them live, we have 4 or 5 of the best ones available right now on the front page of our website. We say read along with Crescent. If you go to willitbeok.com, we have kind of a charity thing going on with an affiliate code that the book is through Amazon there, or you can do your favorite bookstore, which we would love you to do. But you can see there's a tab that says reading along with Crescent. So as we continue this journey, we're putting professionally filmed ones in along with Shan Marks so that you can see the pictures really well, but you can hear Crescent Seer. Because little children of all ages like to see the pictures. And from 10 feet away, it's as hard. So yes, we're going to do the videos out, and we're just enhancing them so you can see the drawings. Because it's really fun to see what she does with her eyes while she's looking at them. And you miss the airplanes and the dragon if you don't. So keep looking. When you're looking for things with her, we announce it at dragonwagon.com first, and then it goes from there to Facebook. So if you go to Dragonwagon, all of the things she does, from plays to writing to workshops to living, show up there first. And if you like just children's things, you could start looking for the children's button. It'll be an easy button this week.
And I will also add, vis-a-vis turning 70, my birthday always falls right around Thanksgiving. So I never celebrate it because who the heck wants to think about cake in the middle of Thanksgiving? So I just always let it go. And I decided this year, Crescent, 70 is a big deal. And you're doing it pretty well. So I'm going to have a kind of 70th birthday over the month. You
And
know,
the
I'm
friends
gonna-
are cheating. She says the month. We're actually having 70 days
Oh,
of
God.
70 years. So, because when you've been flying as long as this dragon, 30 days won't do it, neither will one. So too many well-loved stories, and we want to hear them all.
But even though this year falls on the day after Thanksgiving, I'm still not going to do it on Thanksgiving. But I'll do some stuff.
If there's a story you would like to hear, because Crescent does read the schools virtually in person, if there's one that you need to hear because you're a teacher or because you have something on that you want to hear that out loud from her voice, please reach out at Creative at Dragonwagon, because we can probably make that happen. When we're in the neighborhood, we love to make that happen particularly, but we're all on Zoom, and it's just really easy sometimes to have her do special things like teacher workshops or whatever if we're in the area. But now we're really good at Zoom because we're on it every week, and we can make things happen that may be in the library already.
Curtis, who is back there in the pink shirt,
Wait, Curtis.
Curtis has been part of some writing workshops that I teach online. And this is actually our first time to meet face to face. But I feel like I mean, it didn't feel like a first time because of all the times that we'd spent on Zoom doing writing. And that's another thing you can, you know.
When you're in a group of 12 to 20, or in one of our larger workshops where there's 100 to 1,000, but you see their face every week for 12 weeks, you know their lives. And in this case, we particularly know their lives because they met weekly. And one of the beautiful things, some of us don't like large groups. How many of you like small groups?
I'd love to teach like a small group of people over a period of time, and everybody learns from, you know, we have two hands: give, receive, give, receive. And so I limit my extended writing classes to usually 12 to 18 at the max.
That are one and dones, because some of us are a little timid. We like to put our toe in the water first. We call them one and dones. You get to go see if you could tolerate it or not. And those are 45 minutes to 3 hours, because we all have busy lives. And so not everybody can take 12 Tuesday nights out or 6 Tuesday nights out or a Saturday or a weekend. So I begged for a long time.
She did.
I've been around 24 years. It took me 18 to convince her to let me play with her.
Do you want to tell the story of my junior
Sure.
classroom?
You know, when you're a teacher, you have wonderful things that come to you. And then you have some things that happen to you. And my principal came to a classroom with gifted children who happened to be learning disabled and dyslexic and dysgraphic, which means they don't write very easily. And they said, we're going to give you 2 hours of a speaker who's into writing. And she's never met them. She's never seen them. And I'm like, oh goodness, isn't that lovely? And then she swooped in my room, and my children who have such bright minds and have such limited ability to do things fast wrote nonstop for 30 minutes. After she finished, I chased her for 18 years because that kind of brilliance is not common. And I'm kind of well done in that space of working with special needs kids, particularly traumatic brain injured kids. And she not only got my high kids, she got my middle kids, she got my low kids, she got my in-between kids, and they all like dragons. And so I decided I better see what she's doing, because after lots of years of education and lots of biomes in different places, I hadn't found a child that she can't reach.
She stalked me.
I did. And I'm a good stalker because
She's
I
a
called
good
her.
stalker. She called me. So, any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Was this taped today?
It has been live
Yes.
here.
It has been, it'll be on our Facebook and YouTube pages. It'll live in perpetuity.
And left bank books.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And can you tell them there, because they'll see it on live, but if they're home and not on live today, where do they find you on Facebook?
We are Left Bank Books on
So you put the @ sign in
Facebook,
front of
Twitter, and
Left
YouTube.
Bank Books, and that means Twitter, and that means
Facebook, YouTube, Left Bank Books STL on TikTok.
Cool.
and we will also be playing it in our spaces for you too.
19-year-old cousin who's a big fan of yours.
Oh, how
And
nice.
so I'll be able to send you.
What's her name?
Marsha Spratlin.
Marsha, hey, glad to meet you. You were here in a way, and now you're here in another way. Thank you, Marsha.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing it to attention.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is
My
fantastic.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Would you tell us the process for getting them signed? If you would like a picture, if you would like to share a story, I've separated the table back a little bit so we can, it's hard to hear what you're writing if someone's talking right here. So if you don't mind this distance, we're going to separate you a little bit if you want to get something signed, and we'll quickly get you through. We want you to have the time talking, not the time, worried about it.